welcome back to my continuing series on adaptations across the Atlantic. Now, if you're familiar with any aspect of British culture, you'll know there are some inherently British institutions. A cup of tea, chips with every meal, the royal family, and also certain TV shows, including University Challenge.
Hello and welcome again to University Challenge.
Hello.
Hello and welcome to a new series and a new era of University Challenge.
Hello and welcome to another edition of University Challenge.
What you might not know is that University Challenge isn't British. To be honest, none of those things I mentioned originated in Britain either. For those taking notes, China, Belgium and Germany, but that's besides the point. University Challenge did not begin in the UK. For those completely unfamiliar, University Challenge is a quiz show where two teams of 4 students answer incredibly difficult questions to try to score more points than their opposition. They start with a buzzer race on the first question worth 10 points and called the starter for 10. Then the team that successfully answers that question correctly get 3 questions to themselves for 5 points per correct answer. Starter for 10 questions must only be answered by the person who buzzes in, but the 5-point questions are a team effort. If you interrupt a starter incorrectly, then you lose 5 points, and this continues until the time runs out. It began on British TV station ITV in 1962 and ran until 1987, hosted by Bamber Gascoigne. It then returned 7 years later in 1994, but this time on BBC Two, presented by Jeremy Paxson, who has recently left the show this year to be replaced by Amol Rajan. The questions lean far more towards academia than general knowledge and are renowned for being incredibly difficult.
Champagne, Timperley Early and Fulton Strawberry Surprise are among varieties of what culinary plant?
What form of notation is used to describe how quickly the upper bounds of functions increase as their arguments tend towards infinity, being commonly used in computer science to classify algorithms by speed?
But nonetheless, the show remains popular. Having said all that, it originated on US radio as the College Bowl in 1953, before transferring to television in 1959. It used the same format that came to the UK, but in contrast to the UK version, each winning team would receive $1,500 in scholarship grants, with runners-up getting $500. 5 wins in a row would garner a bonus $4,500. The UK version was a tournament staged over weeks, and as university tuition was free when University Challenge started, and there were limits on prize values on UK game shows, there has only ever been a trophy and bragging rights as the grand prize. The US version ran from 1959 to 1979 before returning to radio for 3 years. But the competition continued despite not being nationally broadcast. It returned to TV briefly in 1984 and again in 1987. Then, in 2021, a TV revival was launched in earnest, but with a much changed format and a $1 million prize. What's surprising about all this for a Brit like me is the fact that it originated in the US and came over relatively unchanged, despite feeling like an incredibly British format. Perhaps this is down to the format not having changed in 65 years, and post-war our two countries were not as different as they became in the subsequent few decades. Or maybe it's the lack of glitz and glamour, playing for prestige rather than cash prizes, or the dominance of Oxford and Cambridge amongst not just the winners but the players. You see, when the show first began, there weren't that many universities in the UK, so to beef up the number of teams eligible to play, Oxford and Cambridge were allowed to enter as the separate smaller colleges that make up Oxbridge universities. This is a practice that has continued despite there being far more universities in the UK now. This institutional classism was mocked in a famous episode of British sitcom The Young Ones, where the grimy working class students of Scumbag College took on a thinly veiled Cambridge College of footlights made up of, amongst others, a young Stephen Fry, who had himself appeared on the actual University Challenge.
Just how are you? I'm never going to matter. Walter Matter.
They used the famous staging of superimposing the two teams that sat next to each other on top of each other to hilarious effect.
I'm completely bloody sick of this!
University Challenge has remained a popular series in the UK ever since its relaunch in 1994. And although the popularity has waxed and waned in the US over the decades, the British public certainly seem grateful for this transatlantic remake. Thank you. Goodbye.